Yes, okay. Good evening, everyone. So we have on our screen our respected, beloved resident. As you know, during our B mixer, we have different formats, and one of them is resident, which is remote expert zoom in. So Andrei, welcome to the resident club and stand-up panelist club as well.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Andrei, I'm delighted to welcome you. Andrei Martin is a partner at PLP Architecture, joining us directly from London, judging by the background, where we also had a wonderful conversation. We could go forever. I was really amazed at all the ideas and like new discoveries that you are trying to implement in your everyday activity. Andrei has been contributing also immensely to some of the benchmark buildings and assets and real estate projects around the world, including the Edge in Amsterdam, often cited, as you know, as the world's smartest and most sustainable office building. And what's fascinating about Andrei and your approach is that you don't just design structure, I understand. You craft entire ecosystems and where technology and human experience intersect. And give our discussions previously, I definitely have a whole array of questions to you. Welcome to our B Mixer, virtually, but still. Andrei.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's interesting you pick up on this idea of an expanded ecosystem for architecture, because I think not as many people know about this perhaps more hidden dimension of what we do. So in addition to design, we invest a very large portion of our profit and time to research and strategy, and that then feeds back into the content of the design. And it helps us in a number of different directions. We have an outfit called PLP Labs, of which I'm a co-founder. And PLP Labs does a number of things to do with the built environment that don't fall within the traditional remit of an architectural practice. So we look at the built environment, but not necessarily in terms of design. We look at it in terms of strategy, in terms of research, in terms of new materials, new technologies. As you say, designing for people, life-centric design plays a big role, making buildings greener, more connected, both technologically and also from a human point of view. So that's a big part of what it is we do here.
Yeah, it's interesting. You make a nod, let's say, to this direction. I had a plan, of course, to cover this, and when we were speaking in London, you mentioned a couple of projects there, including, if I remember correctly, something related to mushroom furniture or mushroom architecture, even.
As architects, we find it somewhat difficult to talk without actually showing something. So hopefully you will soon be able to see my screen, and I can give you a very, very confounded introduction to the practice. Okay, so this is us. Actually, what you see on the screen is basically what's behind me right now. We are all here in London in a studio that accommodates about 150 of us. And we come from all over the world, which is perhaps typical of architects. Architects tend to be very mobile, very global. We move a lot, quite a bit. We speak lots of different languages, and we come from everywhere, which is helping us to also work in lots of parts of the world. So we have projects on 6 continents. We are making inroads into Poland as well, and hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we are also exposed to lots of different contexts, and they can be very enriching because you always learn from every single project that we do has a different context, both culturally and geographically, and they're terrific learning experiences. We have offices across the globe, but we do all of our design work out of our London studio, and that keeps things very, very focused. And our studio culture helps us in our work tremendously, being all in one big room, which you can see a little bit behind me. We have received this accolade last year, and we're one of the most sustainable studios in the world based on the type of work that we do, and perhaps we'll talk a little bit about that later on in our conversation. And our sort of core expertise falls in 5 areas. We are consummate urbanists. We really love cities. We love urban ecosystems, and we've been very privileged to be able to work in some really interesting contexts. So what you see on the left-hand side of the screen is a big master plan we're doing in London, right next to Tate Modern, in a very, very prominent location right on the river. It's a very mixed-use master plan. It's also going to be the world's first net zero large-scale development. All the buildings trade energy with each other, and no heat can actually escape this development. So it's very, very efficient in terms of how it uses energy. Um, in the middle, you see the 2026 Winter Olympic Village, which we've master planned for its legacy stage. Also a really interesting mixed-use, multi-generational project that's very, very green. At the heart of this entire development is a wetland that has a lot of biodiversity, and it's a real public amenity for the whole project. And on the right-hand side is a very large project we're doing in Japan, in Tokyo, a very central site right next to the Imperial Palace, a project for which we're the master planner and also an architect. Our practice really started with looking at workplace. Some of the earliest projects were office buildings, and you've mentioned one of them. It's actually one of the 2 buildings that sort of put us on a map. It's the Edge in Amsterdam, which you can see on your screen at the very, very top in the middle column. It's a very, very green building. It's, in fact, actually is one of the first large-scale deployments of Internet of Things, where all manner of different components of the built environment talk to each other via the internet to give you a very, very clear picture of what's going on in the building at any given time. It's a building that in many ways anticipated patterns of work. So things like hot desking, but also task-based work, agile work, work where essentially the building facilitates you meeting both your team members, but also other occupants that might be of interest to you at any given time. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see the tallest building in the City of London, 22 Bishopsgate. It's also a building that at the moment commands the highest rents in the City of London at over £120 per square foot, which to your audience probably sounds very foreign, talking in feet. Unfortunately, I don't really know meters very well, but I'm sure we'll get there. And then on the bottom left, it's also a really interesting building. It's the headquarters for Sky Media, which is, as you know, one of the largest, if not the largest media company in Europe. This is their headquarters in London. And what's interesting about this building, it's 50,000 square meters of office space, all in a single fire compartment. And it sits underneath the largest timber roof in Europe. And in fact, actually, the staircases that you see there are fire escape stairs, and they're also out of their core. So it's a really interesting way of kind of bringing everyone together. And of course, it's a very safe building, but it's a building that had to push quite a lot of boundaries to get through building control and the fire department and so on. So it's a really kind of innovative piece of architecture and also workplace. We are also doing quite a bit of work in life science. And by the way, this is an opportunity that I really see for Poland to kind of develop and grow, given some of the educational institutions in Poland and the talent and the research that comes out of the country. It's eminently suitable for a real life science and tech push. And perhaps we can talk a little bit more about that. The other building that put us on a map is the Francis Crick Institute, which is the largest cancer research facility in Europe. It's a very, very large lab in the heart of London that accommodates 6 institutions, 3 universities and 3 cancer research institutes that all collaborate together to essentially cure disease. So it's a really phenomenal building. Underneath that, it's another kind of first. It's an incubator stroke translation building for Imperial College here in London, which basically takes research that comes out of the college and brings it to market. So, I know your passion for startups. This building is a building for startups. So if you're a PhD student, you get given a bit of lab space. And if your startup is successful, you move up through the building, lots and lots of different kinds of spaces that essentially take you from startup to an established, market enterprise. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, there are two buildings that I'm really fond of. One at the top is a national meteorological headquarters for the Korean government, which is made out of timber. And it's a terrific building, both in terms of its materials and construction, but also in terms of what's going on inside. And below that is the world's first purpose-built AI training facility. And this is a little bit of a plug. I will be speaking about this building on April 10th at the ULI ULI Polish conference. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about what makes that building interesting. So I won't talk about it now necessarily, but if you're interested, you can see it then. And then again, residential. Lots of residential work across the globe at all scales, from very, very high-end luxury prime residential, which we're doing quite a bit here in London, in the Middle East, in the Far East, and also other types of residential that are in a more kind of innovative end of the spectrum. So things like co-living, shared living, hybrid hospitality, buildings for rent in all sorts of different tenures. And buildings for students and so on. So we're very, very excited about the future of living, as we are about the future of hospitality. And in fact, these buildings that you see on the screen right now are all hybrids. They have a component of hospitality as well as a component of residential kind of working together. A series of the occupiers. And I just want to land and end on a very, very quick sort of mention of PLP Labs, which, as I've said, is our in-house research and strategy group. And at PLP Labs, we look at all sorts of aspects of the built environment that fall in these kind of three categories of planetary health, life-centric design, and technology. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about that if you're interested.
Andrei, yes, absolutely. And I would really love you to double click into the mushroom slash Homo sapiens interaction.
Yeah, with pleasure. So what's interesting is that at PLP Labs, again, we look at lots and lots of things. As I mentioned, future materials are really important for us, both in terms of biophilic design, but also regenerative design. So buildings that ultimately kind of give back to the environment, that are not resource hogs, that actually make the world better by simply being there. And new materials are very, very important for us. So I'll skip ahead through some of the research that we do in the space. And before we get to the mushrooms, I want to show you this as an example. So this is a material that we're using on one of our projects in Rotterdam. It's called a treehouse. It's a very interesting structure. It's hybrid in many ways, both structurally and also in terms of the content. But it's clad in a really interesting material, whereby we use agricultural waste. It's bound in bioresin. And it's a material that is very, very light. It doesn't burn. It keeps its color and its texture, which is exactly what you want in a facade material. It's very, very robust. But it's a material that it's essentially capturing carbon as opposed to releasing carbon out in the atmosphere. So we're very, very excited about that. And of course, as you've mentioned, mycelium is quite interesting. So we've essentially kind of invented a method of 3D printing forms using organic matter, using cotton or hemp or flax or even timber fiber, to essentially create three-dimensional objects that are acting as sort of sponges. And these sponges we inoculate with mycelium. The mycelium grows and occupies these sponges. They feed on the organic matter of which they're made. Once they grow and mature, we stick them in a dehydrator, we arrest their growth, and they become incredibly strong in tension, in compression, and they're also fantastic insulators, both in terms of acoustic insulation and also in terms of sound insulation as well. So we're doing lots of things with Mycelium, both in terms of interior fit out and also larger sort of building blocks.
So it's actually not innovation; it's kind of this rediscovery, like pioneering in what's been around for billion years already.
Well, that's a really interesting way of putting it, because one of the materials that we were using was actually used maybe not that far ago, but was used in World War One for to make airplanes. So it's a material, because it's lightweight and it doesn't burn. It was a kind of a perfect candidate for airplane fuselages. So it was a bit of a rediscovery, because I guess we're giving it a new life. But with Mycelium, absolutely, Mycelium and timber have been around for a very, very long time, and it's actually just now that we're beginning to kind of discover some of their properties. And actually, what's interesting is we're using AI to try to understand the capabilities of these kind of new material systems. You know, what kinds of properties do they have, and how we can combine different ingredients together to kind of really maximize the use of some of these materials.
Ah, interesting. So you combine biochemistry and whatever botanists know about mushrooms, specifically in this case, which is, I think, one of the biggest kingdom as well, right? In the animal, in the on Earth, and then combine these and then apply these to architectural or more of a built environment kind of applications. Amazing. Yes, amazing. You have been active already on almost all the continents, except those where it's impossible now to have deep foundations, I think.
Not been in Antarctica yet, but you know,
Yeah.
it's never too late. It's never too late.
Yeah. What about Poland? Is this still a unknown terra incognita in your practice, or what are plans about Poland?
We are, and I am very, very excited about Poland. For so many reasons. As you know, I am a very, very big fan, and I've been coming to Poland for a number of years now. And with every trip, I fall deeper in love with the country, with the people, with the architecture, with the spaces, and of course the potential and the optimism that the country has looking forward. So there's so many positives that draw me and the studio to Poland.
Clear, yeah. And where do you think is the underestimated potential and value that local developers and investors probably are not noticing yet? Do you see something like this? Can you share it with us?
Well, I think that, of course, local developers are very, very close to the action and to the ground. You know, so I think it would be presumptuous for me to tell local people, something that they don't already know. You know, I'm looking at it from the outside, but what I do see is I see tremendous potential. We already spoken about um, life science and tech. The country has an amazingly talented population that's very, very well educated. There's centers of excellence in the country that produce serious knowledge. And I think the country can really compete at a European level with the creation of life science clusters, zones for R&D and tech that really take advantage of that knowledge that's being produced. And to that, I would like to add another dimension, which to some degree recognizes the geopolitical reality we're in at the moment, whereby Europe and Poland increasingly has to sort of rely on itself for things like defense and defense spending and research. And you know, when you look at what that means in terms of waging kinetic war now, it means things like drones, it means unmanned aerial reconnaissance, it means a whole set of technologies that effectively take advantage of AI, take advantage of research, and take advantage of knowledge that comes from the country. But you need that sort of built environment infrastructure to bring some of those innovations to market, whether for civilian or defense use. So I think that's a really big, to me, it's a really big opportunity to kind of leverage that capability and those talents. I think the other really big opportunity is in terms of urban renewal and urban regeneration. And we've seen some really fantastic examples. I think you've had, for instance, Nicholas Limberg on your panel. And of course, Echo does really amazing work when it comes to placemaking and creating kind of destinations that leverage some of the really kind of fantastic fabric of the city. So we're talking about industrial sites that are given a new lease of life. You know, groups like Capital Park, for instance, have done that in a really nice way with Norblin. And there are others who are doing it. But, you know, when you have entire cities that have this kind of industrial heritage, that's really prime for reinvention and redevelopment, places that have deep character and authenticity and can become really fantastic, you know, public destinations. I think that's a really big opportunity. And then the third thing I would say, which again, I think it's something that people are already looking at in very serious ways, is new forms of living. You know, living that basically takes advantage of, you know, types of configurations that we're seeing now in other countries, like co-living or shared living, where people create communities in really interesting ways. And that can apply to both young professionals, people are at the beginning of their lives, but also to senior actives, people who, you know, perhaps don't need a family home because their children have moved away. They want to live in very urban locations, and perhaps the need for community is even stronger there. You want to socialize with like-minded people. So coming up with buildings that service those real needs, I think, is a huge opportunity for Poland, as it is indeed for Europe in general.
Speaking of living real estate, so we have our beloved sponsor of the business picture, Liva. It's one of the, I think they have a portfolio which can be named as one of the most interesting, and those PRS, or build to rent assets, are kind of flagship, you could say, assets here in Warsaw. But of course, they're growing, and portfolio will grow as well. Andrei, you've touched on so many points, each of which is worth a whole lecture, but ideally dialogue as well. And I absolutely agree. Life science as asset class is not present in Poland. We have some tech parks, probably, but they are all, or most of them, are state funded, and it's a little bit different business model for sure. Cities like Łódź, where Echo and Archicom got double medal, let's say, kind of win at MIPIM this year. Also, is interesting because it's such a boost for cities that used to be kind of like gloomy cities. My first interaction with Łódź was like 15 years ago and so on. And we specifically dived with my wife, going on bus to the suburbs or to the outskirts of the city. It was kind of it was scary, to be honest. Okay, and when somebody said that Łódź is the Manchester of Poland, back in its industrial prime, I completely agree. But now it's back, and it's not Manchester of Poland; it's Łódź of Poland. So this is what's interesting.
Yeah.
How players and actors and built environment are changing not only the physical urban material, urban, what should I say, urbanistically changing the cities, but also improving cities' PR and notoriety for the good reasons.
Yeah, completely agree. And there are, and as you say, there are other places as well. Katowice, I was actually very, very impressed with. I was there a couple of years ago, and the caliber of architecture that I was able to see in the city center was really very, very impressive. And again, it's another one of those cities with kind of a huge industrial heritage and really prime for really profound transformation as well.
So look, speaking of Polish diversity or built environment typology, you could say, which building typologies in Poland you think are not yet present, and that would probably give roots naturally in Poland, based on your experience and what you see at global scale?
Well, first of all, I want to say that there's so many that are present, and so many that kind of give a really kind of good example to a lot of us. And I've mentioned some of the kind of really good urban renewal projects, and they're really fantastic. And a lot of people actually are looking at those examples as significant case studies. But I would say that there's a huge opportunity for alternative types of residential living. So for me, um, uh, the build to rent, like the sponsor of this session, for instance, some of the most innovative building types operate in that kind of broader umbrella of build to rent or PRS. And in that category, of course, we have things like co-living. Co-living, especially large scale shared living buildings, I think are a building type whose time has come for many, many reasons. They're great to combat loneliness. They're great to bring people together along shared interests. They're great environmentally because fundamentally you do live on a slightly smaller footprint, but you actually have access to lots and lots of shared amenity spaces that actually ultimately make your life a lot richer. And also, of course, there's a monetary consideration for this as well. When the cost of living is going way up and cities, especially Warsaw in certain places, very, very expensive to live in city centers, some of these buildings can really make sure that young professionals, are not sort of priced out from living very, very close to, for instance, where they would work. So I'm very, very excited about those kinds of buildings.
Andrei, I will announce a question that we will come back a little bit later, but so that you have time to prepare. I think every architect has at least one funny or shocking story about a project gone completely wrong or with some unexpected challenges. And I will ask you to share one of the, or let's say, the memorable disaster moment from your career and how you turned it around to benefit your benefit and your clients, of course, as well, and maybe the wider community. So keep this in mind. Keep this in mind. I will come back to this in a second.
All right, I'll try.
But now on a more like wider kind of perspective, look, if you had unlimited resources and no, I don't know, regulatory constraints and so on, what architectural innovation you would implement across cities worldwide that you think would transform how we work and or live, or and or get entertained?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. It's a fascinating question, actually, and there's so many things that one can do. I mean, we'll start from the very simple ones, sort of carbon negative cities, places like that where sustainability takes center stage. I think that's really, really exciting. If we dial it up a little bit, once you look at a city, you'll discover very, very quickly that the biggest constraint is transport and mobility and how you actually get from point A to point B. And if you reinvent that, the nature of the city changes fundamentally. So, for instance, let me give you an example. At the moment, every single high-rise building across the globe relies on a technology that's 150 years old. It relies on an elevator that can only go up and down in a shaft that sits empty for the most part, and it's right there in the most expensive bit of real estate at the core of a skyscraper. It also dictates how the structure of a skyscraper is conceived, because you need to have a vertical core in the middle to hold the whole thing up. If you take that away and you say, let's reinvent the elevator, let's think of it in a very different way. Let's think of it as a vertical maglev train, for instance, or using roller coaster technology, using linear induction motors, for instance. Let's put it up on the surface of the building, not in the middle. Put the structure on the surface of the building as well, where it's most efficient, and free up that space in the middle for people to come together, not for cores to go through. You'd have a very, very different kind of building. You'd have buildings that maybe no longer have to go straight up. Maybe they can lean against each other, as other forms of vertical structures in nature do as well. And instead of having vertical transport that goes only up and down, you have a vertical transport that moves in 3 dimensions in the city. So all of a sudden, you have cities that look like three-dimensional networks in the sky with public spaces at all kinds of different levels, occupying essentially another dimension of the city, the Z dimension, which is kind of underutilized at the moment for these kind of constraints. So by the way, all of this is research that we've done at PLP Labs, and again, maybe next time we talk, I can actually show you examples of what this thing would actually look like if you deploy it in the city. But unlimited funds will give you that. But I also want to talk about something else, which is maybe a little bit more personal, is the idea of making cities beautiful again. And very, very often, lack of funds, which is the premise of your question. What would you do if you had unlimited money, right? Very, very often these kind of financial constraints are used as an excuse to impoverish the quality of our built environment and to move away from tried and tested principles that we know have worked for a very, very long time to make cities beautiful, which is why we love, for instance, to go into medieval cities and be surrounded by that kind of architecture that is deeply, deeply engaging, deeply memorable. But we don't seem to do this very often these days, and part of it is for monetary consideration. So I would suggest a return to beauty and putting beauty center stage in architectural discourse, in art discourse, and so on.
Somebody said that architecture is poetry frozen in stone. So I understand, but this is not so easy, because even if now, I mean, the time to appreciate or to educate like your users and consumers of this poetry in stone, the time needed to educate them, to re-educate, to understand it, to appreciate the facade beauty of modern, recently built buildings and so on, I think would require wider educational effort, and it's not that easy, because I think at some higher level, of narration around the globe and so on, not so many people are interested in you, me, our kids being intelligent and subtle and sophisticated in their tastes, let alone in many other areas, including how they appreciate or don't a facade of a beautifully embellished building and so on. Are you ready to come back to your funny or shocking disaster that you turned around?
Well, I will try. I mean, I have to preface this by saying that to get a building through planning in London, where we do some of our work, we are an international practice, and 80% of our work is all over the world. But 20% of our work is here in London, which has quite a tough planning system. To get something through to planning and through local authorities to receive approval to actually sort of build a structure is not trivial. It's not easy, and sometimes it takes its toll, and it takes its toll. Actually, we're talking about the kind of the quality of the architecture. Sometimes it's improved by this. In an ideal situation, going through planning makes for a better building. It takes a long time, and it's sometimes painful, but in the end, you get there. But we've just completed a project where we had a very long period of time that we had to go through planning, lots and lots of meetings with the local authorities. Actually, it was a co-living project, and co-living is still a little bit less understood here. So people had to as you say, there's a lot of education that needed to happen. And one of the differences between London and Warsaw is that we don't have these kind of very prescriptive master planning constraints. So if you buy a plot of land in London, you don't really quite know how tall you can go. It's all negotiation. It's back and forth with a local authority. And this is one of the projects where we were in a series of conversations whereby at every meeting we were asked to reduce and reduce and reduce and reduce the building. So we started at one level and we ended up much, much lower. But I suppose that's a tragic element of the story. What was interesting is that somehow, and I don't really know exactly how this happened, but with every single reduction in height, we somehow managed to find more units in the building. So by the time we actually finished the project, we were at a much higher number than where we started with, or a much higher number than what the client actually considered in their initial appraisals for the scheme. So anyway, everyone was happy in the end. The planners were happy because the building was not very, very tall. The client was happy because they got a lot more units. We suffered quite deeply through the process because we had to redraw the scheme many, 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 many times. But in the end, all turned out okay. So anyway, that's my story.
And that's an example of how PLP architecture work under pressure, under regulatory pressure, let's say in this case, which is a wonderful key note that we could take or accord for the final part of our conversation. Andrei, thank you very much. Just as I expected, it was a fascinating conversation, full of ideas, full of plans, full of interesting projects delivered so far, and I'm sure more are in store on your plate, which is a huge plate for sure. Andrei, thank you very much. I wish you good luck and successful entry into Polish market, and of course further amazing your users and your listeners as well, because you're a fascinating speaker. Thank you very much for this, Andrei.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you. It's very, very nice being with you. And hope to see you soon in person.
At ULI, by the way, and again, we can plug it unshamefully. ULI next event will be in
April 10th.
April 10th. Yes, exactly. Thank you very much again to our sponsors, LiveUp, Globalworth, Pre-A Club, Party Box, Property Insider, Property Forum, Fibri. Am I missing anybody else? I guess, yes, Polska Rada Centrów Handlowych, Polish Council of Shopping Centers, of course. Thank you very much for supporting us. And Dobre Wina, Peter Puławski made quite a show at the event. Thank you very much for supporting us. Andrei, thanks a lot, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.